Thank you for tuning in to the Turtle Optimist podcast. My name is Jenni. There's something about laughing that is cathartic. It can make the worst of times in a brief moment just kind of fade away. I'm really thrilled to bring my friend Sarah, who has dabbled in comedy. And I just have so many questions, and I just want to know all about it. I want to know about your experience and just all the things. So, welcome, Sarah, to the show.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. Do you want to share like where you live or what area of the country or anything like that?
Yeah, so I am born and raised in Rochester, New York. Still live and work there. And it's a great little community, very, I would say it's not a huge city, but very artsy, very cultural, lots of good things happening at all within the city and outside the city. I think it's a nice little place to live, and I'm lucky to be here.
Good, good. Well, I liked Rochester when I lived there for a short time. So, yes, it is a great city for sure.
Definitely.
So you and I talked before the recording, and you had mentioned that before 2017-ish, you had always wanted to try comedy, but you never did. So what
Mhm.
was the specific turning point or the catalyst that finally pushed you to take the writer's class at the Literary Center?
Yeah, so for those not familiar with the area, Rochester is home to one of a very unique place called the Writers and Books, which is, for a smallish city, not very common to have a literary center where you can take classes and workshops and it's almost like, fancy book clubs almost. You can just take a class on almost anything, which included stand-up comedy. And I'd been going to Writers and Books for a number of years for various readings or presentations. And so I've known it's been there. I just didn't realize they also offered this little, 6-week course in stand-up comedy. And I think I had been pursuing my PhD. Like I had applied to a PhD, it feels like eons ago. Um, and I thought that that's what I wanted to do. I was like, this is kind of where I think my life is going. And I think part of me just, I got so invested in that process of applying to doctorate programs. That's almost like another job in and of itself, just to apply and so I finally got into one. It was you know, a low residency program, meaning I could keep my job and do the program at night or in the summers. And so I started that program. I got so excited, I started it. And then basically about 6 weeks into that, I realized this is so not for me and not anything I thought it would be.
Mhm,
I don't really know what I was expecting, but I knew it wasn't going to feed my soul in a way that felt good. It wasn't enough. And
mhm,
so I really had to kind of reevaluate, what am I doing with my time? And so I think through that kind of like just pausing,
mhm,
realizing this isn't the thing that I thought I was going to be doing. And so now what are the things that I want to do and really be conscious and intentional with, well, what are things that really give me joy and really give me purpose and meaning in life? And I just came to the conclusion that comedy was one of those things. And so I just started thinking, well, how do I do that? Can I do that here in Rochester? Is there places to go? And I, you know, knew Writers and Books was here, and that was kind of a jumping off point. It kind of started the whole ball rolling for me to get into it.
mhm. Wow. So the writer's class, did that, so you were writing comedy or you were just writing to express stuff that you were thinking about, and then that kind of led to the comedy stage, if you will?
It's interesting. So the class I took specifically is a stand-up comedy class. And so they literally taught you how to write jokes. They talked about setups and punchlines and callbacks, all these, all the terminology that comics would know about.
Uh-huh.
And so by the end of the class culminated with bring your friends to the final class and you're going to perform like 5 minutes of the jokes you've been working on for the past 6 weeks. And that was my first time ever, like I said, 2017, that I had done that. And I had a great time. Like it was a really great show with everybody. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's taking the class They're bringing their own people in. So you had a good crowd of people. And I think I just got hooked on it after that. I was like, okay, now I got to find out like what are people doing in the community? Like not in a class, but like how are people doing this? Is there a thing happening? Is there a scene in Rochester? And surprisingly, I guess to me at the time was like, wow, there's this whole culture of things happening that I was not even aware of. And I just started plugging into it and just becoming connected with people in the scene. And it kind of rolled from there, doing a lot of open mics and just trying to do it.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you say like good starting point, were there or what was like one of the most memorable lessons or experiences that you gained that prepared you for like an open mic scene?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of different answers to that question, but I guess I would say best thing I learned out of the whole class and then going into open mics was be prepared to tell bad jokes
Mm,
because you're going to do it. Your
yeah.
jokes are not going to be good all the time. There's going to be a lot of bad ones and just, kind of working through it with and using your audience to kind of help you navigate the energy and the feel and the response of like figuring out what works and what doesn't. And it's a lot of trial and error. It's just a lot of trial and error. And also not, I mean, I guess along with the bad joke stuff is you don't know your voice yet. You don't know what kind of comedy you want to tell until you start doing it. Like you really I started by kind of mimicking people I liked.
Hmm.
I'm like, this is the kind of comedy I really would like to tell. So like I started, it sounds funny when you say it, but it's like you start studying people. You start studying comics. So like I'd be watching, all right, let me go back and watch the George Carlin clips that I love. Let me go back and watch Sarah Silverman. Let me go back and you just start and mimicking as I think imitation is like flattery. So I feel like I kind of had a sense of like the kind of comedy I wanted to do or the things I wanted to talk about, but I wasn't quite sure. And so you
Hmm.
kind of start with this kind of mimic
Hmm.
like experience. But it took me quite a while to figure out like what kind of voice I wanted to have or what kind of jokes I wanted to tell. And it's the only way you get there is by telling really bad ones. That's
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And when you're playing off the audience, it kind of makes me think about like improv. So I
very
wondered, did you ever take improv like classes before doing this at all?
funny enough, no, but I did take an improv class while I was doing comedy. So,
Hmm.
pre-COVID when I was still doing comedy, more actively, it was recommended like take an improv class because that helps you with like crowd work or working off an audience and really
Hmm.
getting this sense of energy.
Yeah.
And that was, I have to say, it was huge. It was just such a fun experience because it really did help me kind of let go of the any preconceived notions about what I think might be funny or what surprises me about what's funny or what people respond to. Things that I respond to, maybe that other people won't, or vice versa.
Hmm.
You just don't know until you engage with that audience. So I think improv is very helpful in that regard. And I enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had told me that you discovered a lot of cultural things, and you just mentioned it as well. Once you started doing open mics, so can you elaborate on some of the, I guess, unexpected discoveries or cultural shifts that you experienced?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think like personally for me, it was such an eye opener to just drop a lot of preconceived notions about I don't know exactly how to put it, but societal norms or just expectations, either that I'd put on myself or that, we all kind of experience in a larger society. And so I think comedy tries to, it can, right? Not always, but at least the comedy that I was trying to kind of hone in on was like counterculture, and so I'm really a big fan of people that counter that culture. So it's like just kind of it again, it's not necessarily to be shock. I mean, there's people that
Mhm.
want to do shock comedy and they want to do like, they just want to like rub people the wrong way. But I think I mentioned George Carlin already, but I think he's like one of the best examples of like someone who was always, mostly most of the career that people know him for is he was very counterculture, but he also like moved with the times. He also like he was very good at perceiving and reading how culture was changing. And so he was able to kind of keep up, whereas like some comedians get really angry about like if they don't or if they're not finding their funny fan base any like people are not responding to them the same way they were 20 years ago.
Mhm.
It must be the audience's fault, could never be the comic's fault, right? And it's like it just so part of me really loved that I could really stretch people and people that I admire just as local comedians, people in the community that were just like they were just saying and doing things that I was like, "Oh, is that I didn't know you could do that in comedy." Like I didn't know you could talk about, like seriously like, "Oh, I didn't know you could talk about like that kind of sexual act," or I didn't
Mhm.
wait, you're being self-deprecating, but like you're really being vulnerable. Like I don't understand. Like, it opened up my whole perception of like comedy, like just of what people are able or willing to talk about. And so nothing was off limits. It was like, oh, I can actually just
Right,
I can see what works.
right. Yeah,
What do I want to talk about?
yeah.
Yeah, it was very freeing.
Yeah, and I think that at least for me, because I'm not a comedian, but I do feel like there's so many like taboo topics that people like in their inner circles they might talk about, or like an individual might think about, but then when comedians bring it out, it could be shock value, but it could also be like a leading for more discussion about those topics as people
Yeah.
share those videos or whatever it is and gets it out there in the mainstream so then people are actually talking about what people are thinking about or feeling, which always to me
Yeah.
seems like it's a growth opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think that's where some of the tension comes in because that is kind of the point, at
Mm-hmm,
least from my perspective and what I've seen people do, what I tried to do some of the time, not always perfectly or not always 100% successfully, but you try to find the tension between the joke and the like kind of the commentary on something, right?
mm-hmm,
Which is a lot of good comedy does is it just it makes me, when people joke about abortion or they joke about death or they joke about like whatever, 9/11, right? Like 9/11 feels very far removed now.
mm-hmm,
But having to know, like, you probably didn't want to make a 9/11 joke like a year in after nine
right.
eleven,
Mm-hmm,
right? The same thing with COVID. It's like when COVID was happening, probably don't want to be making a lot of COVID death jokes as far as like
right.
again, that's all subjective. Comedy is very subjective as well. So it's like, but you've got to know your audience and know what people are ready for and know what that tension is. Like, this is funny.
Mm-hmm,
And I'm also making a comment. I'm commentating on this thing because we know it's true. Like, everybody knows this thing,
mm-hmm,
but is it funny enough? And are people ready for it? Are they willing
yeah,
to, experience it or not? So there is always that you are always kind of testing the limit a little bit. And it's a risk, like you're taking a risk. And so you don't necessarily know. And again, like it goes back to my point, like be prepared to tell bad jokes because you will tell a lot of them. And that's part of the trial and error, I think, too. It's just,
yeah,
it's gonna work sometimes and then other times it's not.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So the open mic scene is kind of known for the vibrant nature. You have different people coming up and you don't know necessarily what they're going to talk about or what they're going to say. And yeah, and there's a lot of different opinions or perspectives being shown, within the same audience. And so, what were some of the initial challenges or anxieties you faced when you first stepped onto the stage of open mic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I did not have, typically you hear people talk about like stage fright, like, oh, I'm just afraid to get up there. I actually don't have a thing about being afraid on stage. Like, I'm actually very comfortable talking in front of people. It was more about my own, am I going to say this? I have these particular words in this particular order and I'm going to say it. Am I going to remember to say it that way or am I going to forget the word? So it was more like my own internal making sure I'm doing what I said I was going to do, not so much about worrying about the people, especially when I started. because you're trying to memorize, you're trying to think about how you want to say something. When do you want to pause? When do you say this word, or do I tweak it to this word? Or so, that stuff in the beginning was really interesting just to think about, like, maybe the words I said in my head sounded really funny, but then if I added a pause or switched them up, the audience would have a different reaction than I thought they would. And so it's like, oh, maybe I have to go this direction and not this direction. And so speaking to the idea of different types of people, different personalities, at least in the scene that I'm in, I'm sure this is everywhere too. I mean, we think about, like, um I'm trying to remember, there was one open mic. I'll just share the story so it kind of gives you an
Yeah.
idea. It was one of the funniest things I'd ever witnessed. I was at an open mic at I would say predominantly lots of white males going to an open mic, which comedy is a predominantly white male industry. Like, I don't think that's a secret. Um, but I think there's been some good intentional things that at least the Rochester community was trying to give more voice to women, to queer people, to people on the fringe, or, on the outskirts,
Mhm.
not necessarily like out of society, but just meaning like who's not getting the opportunities that maybe we want to think about giving opportunities to. And I just remember there was one open mic where somebody, you know, a young white male comic got up and probably was one of their first times doing it, and they got up and they, did a few jokes, and a couple of them were just very sexist, misogynistic, and not new ideas, right? And so nobody really thought they were that funny. And I just remember a fellow female comic was sitting in the back of the room, and the guy was getting frustrated that nobody was really laughing at the jokes. And he was like, so he tells another joke, but he's clearly agitated. And he basically tells a joke that says, well, my girlfriend or my wife or my significant other, they were in bed and they were just rah, 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 in my ear about something. And I was like, I'm just gonna shut her up and make her have sex with me or something, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
It's basically insinuating I raped my girlfriend. Ha ha
Yep.
ha.
Yep.
And he kind of lost it. He just went, "Oh, so that's not funny. So blah 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 blah. Why can so and so get up here and like say this joke, but I get up here and say this joke and it's not funny?" And my fellow comic, without missing a beat, says from the back, she goes, "Consent."
Oh.
And the whole room erupted in laughter because that was the funniest thing we heard since that guy had taken the stage.
Yep.
And but it was also like a comment on,
Yeah.
you have to be funny too. Like,
Yeah.
you can't have just like a friend or two of yours think you're funny and then get on stage and just talk. You have to actually think about what you're writing and what you're going to say and how you're going
Right.
to say it. So
Yep.
that's like a microcosm of like kind of a typical thing
Mhm.
that I would see at open mics, is where, you get a lot of people that come in thinking I'm funny. My friends think I'm funny and I'm like this, but it's like they don't realize, like, there's a lot of actual work behind it, that you have to take time to really understand that a joke actually takes skill. Like, you have to write the joke, you have to think about what the punchline is, how are you going to set it up, and what word choices. It's more complicated. And I think
Yeah.
I don't that's just one story of many that I could probably share with you that
Wow.
explains some of the open mic scene that I was a part of for a number of years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the guy was like, I am funny, and
Oh
so,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
why is she booing me off the stage or whatever? So, yeah, yeah, interesting.
These women be crazy, like that's
Right?
kind of
Right.
that's not a new
Right.
trope at all, is it? No, not at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So you had told me that you had mentioned that comedy helped you come out and deconstruct your religious background, How
Yeah.
did the process of writing and performing the jokes facilitate that personal transformation for you?
Yeah, it was, yeah, I would say it was probably the most profound impact on me. Like, um, either just before or maybe right after COVID, really started to really question a lot of things. And I think from 2017 up until before COVID, where I mean, I was doing comedy all the time. I was like doing open mics and I was, doing some shows. I was working with people on stuff. So I was just kind of always in the hustle and grind of it
Mhm,
for the most part. Obviously, I still had to go to work and, pay my bills and all that. But it's like if I had free time, I was really trying to go to shows to support people, friends of mine, or write jokes or um, perform and practice stuff I had been working on. And I think through that, like I know I'm going to keep referencing prepare to write bad jokes, but that's really like the basis of it is I started figuring out that I was when I would write a joke or if I thought the joke didn't go well or didn't land well, I realized I had to start asking myself, I don't think I'm being truthful in my
mhm,
joke for
mhm,
me, right? Like,
mhm,
I mean, I'm telling a joke and it might be funny,
mhm,
but it wasn't my funny. It wasn't my truth. It wasn't my experience or my lens on it because it really it took me some time to really figure out like why do I feel I was feeling kind of some cognitive dissonance at times of like writing jokes and knowing that maybe there's something there, but also at the same time, like, I don't know if that's my joke. Like, it doesn't feel like a joke that I would want to tell. And I couldn't figure out why, and then I think slowly, as I start like watching other friends of mine or other comics take the stage and just seeing their comfort or perceived comfort of like their material,
mhm,
being confident in what they're saying and really owning it, like really just they've internalized whatever that is, like really, really good comedians that I would watch. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not who I think I am. Maybe I'm not presenting, or maybe I don't know fully who I am as a person. And it
mhm.
kind of started there.
Yeah.
And so I just started exploring,
Mhm,
taking risks, thinking about, and again, in comedy, but just in life in general, like thinking about what does that mean for me?
mhm,
And, parallel to this stuff happening, I met someone, a friend who stirred up some feelings in me, and they were a woman. And I was like, this is weird and new and different.
mhm,
What?
mhm,
So just having to kind of grapple with that at the same time and coming from a Christian background. I was raised Catholic, and then as a young adult, I, went through this evangelical phase of, you know, uh, Jesus saves, and again, I think at the time it helped me belong and give me a sense of like purpose and foundation. But I think I'm sure, as you know, or many people who are going to be listening understand that religion and or just even some kind of religious lens, there's lots of open secrets, right? There's lots of implications of things that are being taught or being said. And so it's like, well, if you're Christian, you can't be gay. Well, if you're Christian, you can't have sex before marriage. If you're Christian, you can't. There's just all these like implications or open secrets that you don't really think about too often until you do. And so I
mhm,
just had started really confronting a lot of things that I had been taught or accepted as truth that I just was not comfortable accepting anymore.
mhm,
And so but it takes a toll. It's a huge grieving process. I would say I'm probably a decade in or more than a decade now of like deconstructing my own
mhm.
past. And I
Yeah.
think comedy helped me I think it did really stir up and initiate a lot of those boundaries that I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm being authentic with myself. So I want to be more authentic.
Mhm,
And comedy allowed me to tell the jokes or to try the jokes, to take
mhm,
the risks,
mhm,
and to be like, and I really could see as time went on, it was like, oh, I'm being myself. I'm being more myself than I ever have been. and I'm really telling funny jokes. Like it just, it was like something just clicked. So I started doing, you know, just more jokes about me. Like, not, again, I'm not necessarily a self-deprecating comic, but using my experiences, using what I'm going through or thinking about or talking about with people, and like not worrying about what it should or could sound like. It's just like, no, this is just here's my thoughts. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's how my lens, this is my lens on it.
Yeah.
Let's see if other people find that to be interesting.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was a time of self-discovery. Not only
Yeah,
were you trying to do this new thing of comedy, but you're also learning about yourself and about what you believe and just all of that. And so it just sounds like a really um, powerful time in your life. And
yeah,
as you're just trying to go through it and then sharing it with other people, which I think is a really important part as well.
absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So you and I talked about really when you got into this community. So I don't know, comedy community. I'm
Yep,
not sure what you call it, but
absolutely. Yep.
it's very diverse. It's talented. Um, the people there come from all backgrounds and walks of life. And so, what were, if you can think of one or two, what were some of the most impactful or memorable interactions that you had with other comedians or creatives during that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the highlight for me, a couple of the highlights were producing comedy shows with a fellow friend of mine, fellow comic, uh, queer. We did, I think I'm gonna get the name wrong, but I'm sorry, the show was called Queer AF Comedy.
Mm,
And my friend who also, starting and dabbling in comedy, has a, professional career in another field, but wanted to try this, and who is also trans. And
mm,
so we started collaborating on several projects. And so one of them happened to be that one of the Pride shows. I think we did it for a couple of years at the local comedy club. And it was we did one year, it was like we did storytelling and comedy, and then the other time we did just a comedy show for the Fringe Festival in Rochester. And so we did two different stand-up showcases featuring women and or queer comics, kind of
mm.
giving, elevating people
Mhm.
that normally don't get the attention
Yeah,
that they probably should.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
that's
so. I think
great.
that was the best part for me, was just like collaborating with other people and just
Mhm.
networking and getting more information, or getting more um, ideas from each other, and
Yeah,
you know, just the way you can connect and build an organic kind of connection with people. It's been really great, and it is very diverse. I mean, we have very young people, much older people, anyone in between, and kind of just, and everybody's at different levels or different experiences, or they're like me now. I'm a little more kind of, I'm light on the comedy. I haven't done it. I mean, I still do sometimes, but not as much as other people. And it's been interesting to see how that diversity is still there. It's just, I think it just changes over time.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, how did the experience of writing and performing comedy change your perception of your own creativity and potential?
Yeah, that's a deep question. Yeah, I would say I think, I mean, personally, I think it just helped me to realize, like, taking risks is all part of it, and it's worth it. Like, if I have an idea, I should really, I should pull that thread and like think about it more. Whatever that might mean. I mean, it could, um, whether that's writing or comedy or just anything in life that I've been thinking, like, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should think about doing that. It's like, it's all a risk. Everything we do is a risk, so you might as well take it. And the worst that's going to happen is it might not work out.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I look at it.
yeah, yeah. And you just try again.
Try, yes,
Yeah,
keep getting up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you kind of were on this comedy journey before COVID.
Hmm.
And so then how was the pre-COVID comedy scene different than, I guess, what happens now, and what are people currently experiencing?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, I mean, for everybody at the time, like when COVID first happened, it was like nobody was doing anything because you couldn't. There was a time that there was a lot of Zoom comedy shows, which I will just let you know doesn't really work as well as in-person comedy shows.
Right.
People were trying to do the best they could with what they had. And
Mhm.
so it was still a way to connect. And I did some of them every so often. Um, but I think as like the years have gone on, and I think now it's like this month is like 5 years since the initial beginnings of like the official pandemic. And so it's kind of crazy when I think about that. Um, I think that I just had to make a decision for myself to say, I enjoy comedy. I really do. I'm so glad that I do it, that I've done it, that it became a part of my life. But I don't love it so much that I can't breathe without it.
Mhm.
And so I see my friends, I see people in comedy, they're killing it. Like they are busting their butts, they're doing the hustle and the grind, and they're getting gigs and they're getting booked. And I'm just either too old or I just don't care enough. And so I was like, you know what? I enjoy it for what it is, but I don't want to make it a career. Like I don't want to be a road comic. I don't want to try to make this like a money thing, like a livelihood where a lot of people are.
Mhm.
Um, and props to them because some of my
Right.
friends and people that I see are doing amazing things and they're still plugging. And I'm always happy for them. I always go and support them when I can. Like I go to their shows or and I'm always amazed at what they're doing because I can see the growth in a lot of people. But for me personally, it was after COVID, I just had to prioritize. Again, going back to that question you asked before of like, well, what made you decide to do comedy? It's kind of the same as what made me decide to maybe step back a little bit. It's like I just had to figure out what is the most important thing to me. Like, what do I want out of my life? And I think some of the self-discovery has led me to be like, yeah, I don't know if that's the end all be all for me. It's definitely opened up a lot of doors and a lot of, new ideas and new thinking, and I think led me to where I am now personally. But um, as a career path, I'm like, God bless the people that keep doing it because it's hard. I mean, any creative endeavor, like in the arts, which doesn't make you a lot of money, um,
Mhm.
you have to do it because you love it. You just do. And I just realized for me, it's like, well, I like it. I don't love it that much. I
Yeah.
really do. I enjoy it immensely. I like the creative process of writing a joke, coming up with a punchline. Is it going to work? Is it not? But do I have to do it all the time? No, not really. I don't have
Right.
to.
Yeah. 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 Well, and maybe it served its purpose for you with all of the things that you learned about yourself, etc. And now it's someone else's turn, So, and that's fine. That's fine.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Nothing's a waste. Nothing's a
Right.
waste.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So my last question for you is looking back at your initial steps in comedy, what
Mhm.
advice would you give to someone who feels that same pull towards it, but is hesitant to take the leap?
I say do it. Like, even if you're scared, even if you're not sure, the worst you're going to do is tell a bad joke and somebody won't laugh. And at best, you might have a good joke and you might enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
always, like, I guess it goes back to the risk. Like, take the risk, whatever it feels like to you. Like, there's a lot of, I think it's a more supportive community than I thought. So I would say go into it expecting more support than you anticipate because there's a lot of great people, especially locally here in Rochester that would like to talk to people more than I do. But I think, people have different life paths and it's just you're not always able to connect. But through social media and through other means, it's like I still am in touch with several people that I really admire and are doing great things and hope to continue to watch them grow and blossom in in their own right. So I say just do it. The worst that's going to happen, I mean, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to tell bad jokes, but you might gain some friends that you never thought you would.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll end with that. Thank you, Sarah, so much for stopping by. I
Welcome.
really do
Yes.
appreciate it. And for anybody out there who wants to be the next comedian, all that can happen is that you tell a bad joke, but you can tell a good one. So take care
Absolutely.
and see you next week on the Turtle Optimist.